for electric services. Don?
Thank you, Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Donald Com, Director of Electric Service. Let me share my screen with you. All right, I think you're able to see that. Everyone able to see my screen? Yep, all right, thank you very much. So, as I mentioned, Mayor, capital improvements plan, I'm going to be talking about electric services. Going to cover the next 5 years. And let me quickly walk through my slides for you. So basically, within electric services, to kind of make it easy, I'm going to kind of go over it in 3 broad groups. We have what are called transmission projects, which are the high voltage transmission wires. We have the distribution projects, which basically deal with anything below transmission. And then we've got several power plant projects. And I've broken those down by power plant, because we have different units, by generation in general, and then a few other projects that relate to that. Over the next 5 years, our proposed budget, we have in our capital budget to spend slightly over $25 million. So let's first talk about transmission and distribution. And let me talk a little bit about my slide to help understand how I've got this laid out. So within each of the projects, I list what the project is and then the corresponding page number within the budget book that each of you have. On the right-hand side, I talk about how much money we're going to spend in that area for the first fiscal year. So as you can see here in transmission and distribution, we're looking at spending roughly $1 million in the first year. The number below that, that 33 1/3%, then is the percentage of money we're looking at spending within transmission and distribution over the entire 5-year period. So it gives us a picture of how we're supporting transmission distribution versus how we're going to be supporting the power plant, both in a single year and then over the 5 years. The other things you can kind of see is, fortunately, most of the projects that I'm presenting tonight have come before City Council in years past. The ones that are in red are the ones that I'm kind of highlighting, and I'll spend a little bit more time talking about those because those are new to the budget. So starting on page 15 and 16, the transmission projects, these have come before you before. The 69 kV transmission reconstruction, we have high voltage 69,000 volt lines. There are poles that we want to start replacing proactively rather than waiting till they fail. So we have money in the budget to do that over the next 5 years. Ontario Road Substation, this is a substation that serves load, obviously, over on Ontario. And we have a transmission line that comes in there, but there are no breakers. So when we have an outage on the transmission line, the entire substation is without power. We're capable of serving our customers, but we have to physically go out and reroute power. By putting breakers in here, we're able to separate any kind of transmission outage from one side or the other and reduce, if not eliminate, transmission outages to those that are currently served by Ontario substation. The streetlights and line relocation project on page 17, this is where we're closely tied in with Public Works. And as they're doing projects, we'll come in, and these funds allow us to move lights, move lines, replace lights. A big amount in this project right now is to do the Duff South 16th project, if and when that gets kicked off. We've got plenty of transmission work we've got to do down there and move some lines. LED street lighting, I'm happy to say we're in the last year of our project where we will be changing out street lights. These are not signal lights, but street lights. Following this next year, once we're done with LED changeouts, future ones will be done under the maintenance and O&M portion of our budget. Next one, a little bit highlighted here, the equipment storage expansions. One of the big things that we've learned through COVID is material ordering has increased in terms of delivery times. So we're finding that to maintain proper levels of equipment, we're having to order more equipment, more materials earlier so that we have them on hand and not have to wait for delays. To do this, we do need to expand our current storage facility. And this is a project that will allow us to use existing space in an existing building to add additional storage for more equipment. Another way to look at the distribution system is we look at it from a reliability standpoint. How can we reduce outages? 3 projects that you've seen before are the Dayton Avenue substation switchgear, Mortensen Road and Vet Med substation switchgear changeouts. A new one that we're looking way out on the 5th year is at Haber Road. This substation today is used to primarily serve Iowa State, but there's enough space there where we can put in a future transformer and bring out a future feeder, and it sits in an ideal location to where we can then continue to support load growth in the downtown area. That's on page 23. Moving on to the power plant, I'll cover these by individual generating units. The first one I'm going to cover is our combustion turbine. We have several improvements out there. The sheet can be found on page 26. And in our budget this year, we've tried to streamline a lot of these projects by combining them when they deal with a certain power plant or a certain unit, so we don't have as many sheets as we normally would have in. So within this sheet, and if you look at page 26, you can see how we've broken this out. We've already talked to you in years past about changing out the remote terminal units, putting in meters, and upgrading the relaying. We would also do control upgrade, and again, you've seen these before. What's new in this particular CIP is a little known fact. Unit gas turbine number 2 was originally built and designed to go to Saudi Arabia during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and it was rerouted here. It didn't have the weather protection on there, so we've been going out there and putting heating tape and trying to keep the unit from freezing up in the wintertime. We're finally at a point where it just makes more sense to build a building, interestingly enough, over the equipment, keep the building, and we'll have less problems with the freezing and thawing of some of the equipment. So that's a new addition to the combustion turbine improvements. Moving on to Unit 7, which is one of our base load units. Base load meaning that it's typically when we turn it on, we keep it on. And this sits at the end of Main Street, and it's one of the 2 large units located just across from Electric Admin. Many of these projects you again have seen before. The exciter and cooling water replacement you've seen, condenser tube replacement. That one's required by the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to remove copper out of the water and waste stream. We're going to replace that with stainless steel. The electrostatic precipitator, the enclosure, several years ago we had some issues there where some of the lagging let loose, and we want to get up there and button that down to make sure that panels don't come off in high winds. We also have the main steam line that has some asbestos on it. We want to get that removed and re-insulated. Something new into the Unit 7 is what we call air heater baskets. An air heater basket, when working properly, makes the unit more efficient and allows us to take waste heat and to preheat air that goes back into the power plant for the combustion cycle. So we want to replace those on Unit 7. And then we've scheduled a turbine minor overhaul. We're finding that if we go in and what's called open, clean it up and close it, they can last longer, and we don't have to do as many or as more expensive major turbine overhauls. So we're able to spread those out. So we've got that for Unit 7. Looking at Unit 8, as you're aware, we're about to start work on replacing some superheater tubes. That's in this year's budget, so that's why you're not seeing a sheet. However, that is the main step in how we're going to fix Unit 8, and it will operate, we think, just as well as Unit 7 has when we replace those tubes. We've had virtually no problems with the corrosion in Unit 8 or in Unit 7 when we put what's called Inconel on there. The tube corrosion injection, there are additional precautions that we can take where we will use, one of the products is called Moose Drool, and that actually counteracts some of the chlorines and stuff that we have within the boiler. So we'll be looking at that process and that system over the next couple of years as a further insurance policy, further enhancement to controlling tube wastage within the boiler. The two other projects, again, you've seen before, the precipitator reconstruction, and again in Unit 8, we'll be doing a turbine minor overhaul. And those sheets are found on 35, 40, and 43. From an infrastructure standpoint, we're continuing to do work on the plant building itself. The reason I have this in red, we're about to begin a modification to the bathrooms. If you can picture a plant that was built in the 40s, it's generally set up for male bathrooms and male showers. We're moving towards a unisex bathroom. We've added some females to our staff, and we need to bring our plant up to today's standards. So we'll be doing that here in this next fiscal year. Fire protection, there's always fire protection projects that you want to do within a power plant, so not much has changed there. Same with load center breaker replacement. The critical system generators, I think everybody recalls what happened on August 10th of this year. Derecho came through, and it was an eye-opening experience specifically for electric. We lost 3 transmission lines. We have 3 separate transmission lines. All 3 of them either were on the ground or had trees in them, or both. At the same time, we had 1 unit online. It was smaller than the remaining load, and it struggled like nobody's business to try to keep the loads on. We let it run for about 8 minutes till we, as a precaution to the system, took that unit offline to protect not only the generator, but the rest of the system. Through this study, we're determining that there are a couple of places that if we put in some backup generation, we then will be able to, under conditions of the loss of the other 3 transmission lines, that we will have the capability to restart our own units, pick up our city internally, as opposed to waiting for outside transmission lines to come in. I want to caution council, though, that's not to say that the extended outages of all of the customers that experienced during the derecho for those 8 days, generation will not solve that problem alone. There was still a lot of distribution systems, distribution lines that were on the ground, had trees in them, and they still needed to be cleared. But this will allow us to retain voltage and bring voltage up within the city and help to restore it more quickly. Plant relay and controls, you've seen before. The other one in red, variable frequency drives. This is something that we can install on our fans and pumps that will allow us then to have more fine control as we bring them up and down, instead of when you bring a large motor online, it tends to hit the system very hard, and a variable frequency drive will soften the starts and stops of these units. Other generation related projects are the fuel and waste systems. And again, fortunately, none of these are new. We're continuing to look at ash pond modifications to meet EPA guidelines that we were given. Wastewater treatment, with that, we're looking at reducing the cost and what we have to do with our wastewater, and we have a project with that. The RDF bin, refuse derived fuel bin, this is the bin that links up resource recovery with the power plant. And interestingly enough, the bin is made out of something called cortan steel, which by its nature is supposed to rust, dry, and then it seals itself. Well, within the RDF bin, it doesn't ever get a chance to dry, so it's just kind of been continuing to rust itself through. So the plan there is to take the RDF bin and replace a lot of it with stainless steel. A critical component of this, and we'll be talking about this when we get into the operation and maintenance budget next month, is we're also looking at a waste to energy study, which should have an impact on the life expectancy we'll need out of the RDF bin, and more to follow when we get to that in February. Coal yard reclamation, that's another project that we have. We're not burning coal anymore, so we have a piece of city property that we would like to reclaim and potentially make it a green space, or find other city uses for that land. Then we also are not using fuel oil in Unit 7 or Unit 8. It's all natural gas and RDF fired. So we have some old fuel tanks that can be removed when it's makes sense and is practical. Last two things, we're looking at bringing Wi-Fi into the plant. You can only imagine that when we do tests and we're monitoring things on the power plant, it's all hardwired in. Well, it's time that we bring this to the 21st century, and by putting in a stiff Wi-Fi system, much of the monitoring of boiler controls can be done using a strong Wi-Fi. Then we have actually 2 units, 5 and 6, that have been retired, boy, for as long as I know. And there's a potential here that if we remove the boiler portions of unit 5 and 6, this could be a good home for a waste to energy boiler, if that's one of the options that comes out of the study. I think with that said, let me just touch on the key points. So our 21-22 budget, basically we want to have it reflect on capital resources towards plant improvements. We want to increase the reliability of our units. We want to proactively replace old, outdated, and deteriorating equipment. We've learned through COVID that material lead times have lengthened, sometimes from weeks into months or even a year. So we want to have materials that are critical on hand before we need them rather than waiting for them. From derecho, we learned that we need some black start capabilities at our plant, and we've got that included in the budget. And we want to continue to improve power plant boiler life so that we can continue to burn refuse-derived fuel. Are there any questions, Mayor or ladies and gentlemen of the council?
I just had one. I liked the point you made about the black start capabilities, learning from the derecho. Are there more plans since the derecho to move lines underground? Or are we still continuing sort of on our, the direction we would have headed with that?
Thank you for asking that. That is something that we're looking at. To go from overhead to underground, there are pros and cons to that. From a con standpoint, we would be going from overhead in the backyards to underground in the front yards. Typically, those places are where there are beautiful old trees. Many of those trees, if we put it in the front yard, would be gone. So I'm thinking of some of the older neighborhoods. So that's one aspect that we're very sensitive about. We think it would take about a 5% increase in rates across the entire in cost to acquire utility to pay for that, and it would typically take about a 20-year time frame. I base these facts and figures on talking to a few other cities that have gone through this and the expense that it cost. The positive sides are we would be better protected from outages caused by wind and ice and rain. But it is something we're doing, but it would be a major shift in our budget. And we're not at a point yet where staff would be recommending that.
Could I follow up on that? Oh, sorry. I was going to follow up with Bronwyn's question. The critical electric service system generator project doesn't begin until 2022-23. And I was just wondering about that year lag time before we begin on that, which seems like a pretty important project.
Thank you for the question. It is an important project. Some of the things that we think are even more critical that we'll be working on within the power plant right now that are going to occupy our time even more than the generators are going to be to get the boiler and the turbine in Unit 8 up and running. And that's going to take us in through 2021. That's a higher priority for us. We do share your same concerns that we'd like to be prepared for an outage. In looking at it, we also want to make sure that we don't have too many dollars front loaded into our 5-year budget to where it could cause us to have any kind of a rate increase early on to start paying for some of those. We believe that the derecho won't come back again next year and we have a little bit of breathing room, but it's not that we aren't looking at other ways of better securing the system. But that's why we've fit it into the budget where we have materials, resources, and where we can afford to put that in.
Thanks.
David?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the Wi-Fi you mentioned, the secure Wi-Fi. And I know that you said that it would only be used for retrieving data, not for sending control commands. But it's also possible to imagine that there would be like a monitoring system that really just retrieves data, but the monitoring system is considered to be critical. And so if it's unable to retrieve data, that would take the system offline. Is that a sort of risk that you have to deal with in the design of the system as well? Or is it rather the case that even if someone were to completely jam up the Wi-Fi, then you'd still be able to run without interruption?
Yeah, you're getting probably deeper into where we've gone with this project. This is out into the 5th year of our budget in looking at all of that. The key is we can't allow anyone to have access to that information. We never want to use it as a control mechanism per se, just from the standpoint that this day and age cybersecurity is something that we take very, very seriously within the electric utility. The details on what will be done with that Wi-Fi, as we get closer, we'll be bringing projects to council, but that's 5 years out and we haven't even begun to look at the detail.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Other questions for Mr. Khan?
Yeah, so I want to, one more question on derecho. So we sort of trust you, Don, to help us learn the lessons. I don't want to spend money just to spend money, but I also want to make sure that we're putting in place the things that we learned from the challenges we had with the derecho. And I think the community is really wanting us to do a deep dive on this. So is it just the additional generation that we're putting in place? So for example, are we stockpiling any extra poles? Or are there things that we look back and wish we could have had additional materials that we would have in case of an additional sort of widespread storm?
So let's touch on that for a little bit. And I don't want to spend too much time going through the history of the derecho. I know council has seen a report that the city manager's office has put out on that. The derecho was unique. We had not experienced anything like that. And the damage and the width of the damage that it caused took out a major power line that went down to Ankeny, took out a major power line that went over to Boone Junction, took a major power line out that goes down to Johnston. To reestablish the power using those outside lines, the city is basic, I don't say dependent, but the city as a utility works with the other utilities in the region. So before we could bring power to the city, we had to wait for another transmission entity to make the line safe out to Boone Junction so that a major tree could be removed so that we then could establish voltage here. The reason why we're focusing on the generation within our budget is that reliance on a third party bothers us. And by putting in what we call black start generation within the city, we're blessed with 2 large baseload units, 2 peaking units that under normal circumstances can carry the city if the outside world falls down around us. The key is you need a voltage to start that first unit. And we do have 1 unit that starts on air. Well, that air compressor needed electricity to get the air to the compressor to start the unit. And we put a generator over there to start that, and it took hours to build up enough air pressure for 1 start. And we needed to do that again. We do not want to be beholden to third parties when we have a tremendous amount of resources that we can take care of ourselves, if you will, in an extreme situation like that. That will not prevent the outages that occur down at the distribution. Please understand that. I'm not promising that we can take care of that, But those are the other things that we're looking at. Are there other places that we can put fuses? Are there places that we can separate out lines and bring people back? There were so many trees and so many wires that were down. Stockpiling, we never had any problem with poles. Transformers, it's not that we were ever waiting on a transformer. The biggest thing was having 9 additional cities in here with crews that were working 10, 12, 16-hour days. And that's kind of what it took. And you're saying, well, could we have brought more people in? I wouldn't want to do that, because then you start worrying about safety concerns. You know, we needed somebody from our utility to be with each crew to make sure that everything was done absolutely safe. And I will point out, at other utilities that had these outages, there were near deaths and there were accidents that occurred because there was poor communication. So we were very meticulous in our safety. Not to belabor the point, but those are all of the things that we think about as we analyze the derecho.
You're muted, Tim.
That was a very thorough answer and very helpful. Just one final comment. I trust that as cities that were affected similarly to Ames continue to sort of unpack and learn the lessons, I assume you'll be in contact with your peers, with Cedar Rapids and other communities that are continuing to try to learn the lessons to make our system more resilient to future storms. But your comments were extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other comments or questions for Mr. Khan?
Don, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and that is, I'm really glad to see that we are hiring women and that we're getting those restroom facilities and shower facilities converted so that they are unisex, should we happen to be hiring anyone who is trans or identifying as something other than male or female.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Don, just a follow-up question on the critical electrical system generators. Just to verify, again, it's back to the derecho. Is it accurate that you're putting those projects in as soon as you conceivably can? Because as Gloria pointed out, they're in 22, 23, and 23, 24. There are things that have to happen prior to that in order to pave the way for those projects. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, Mayor. What we're looking at is staff time, and there are no facilities that need to be done ahead of that relate directly to the generation. However, we do have a tremendous amount of resources that we're applying to the boiler itself to get Unit 8 back operational and things like that. If we have the time, and we can easily work with City Manager's office and with Council and advance those projects if we can make the resources and the dollars available.
Well, I know that you're committed to providing power to everybody. That was demonstrated, this past summer. But I think that I would sense there'd be some support from council and the community if some of these projects could be advanced and get done sooner, so you have the ability to get these started. I understand the distribution network is different, but to not be reliant upon outside sources would seem to be an admirable goal. And at a total cost of $700,000, that seems to be a lot of money. It pales in comparison to the overall budget of what's being spent, every year. So,
yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
One last
Thank
call.
you very much.
Pardon me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to Keith. Are you on? Good deal. All right, we're gonna go back and we're going to pick up community betterment, and council will be project pages 128 to 138 for Parks and Rec, and page 142 cemetery. So Keith, turn it over to you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. So, hoping that you see my screen.
We can.
All right, perfect. So just I'll kind of go through the different areas. Just going to highlight a few of the projects that we have. We do have a lot of them. Over $7.6 million worth of projects in the 5 years. So with park system improvements on page 128, this we did put in last year. So converting 2 tennis courts to 6 pickleball courts at McCarthy Lee Park. We did receive a lot of feedback on this last year. That's why it was put in, and we'll continue to move forward. And that is in year 21-22. So consolidating park maintenance facilities. On the screen, up in the upper right-hand corner is our old maintenance facility. Then we have our current maintenance facility, which is the green box, kind of more towards the upper left. And then in the lower left is where the cemetery is. So we're really going to be working on consolidating all of our staff and equipment. And we feel that we'll get some efficiencies with having everything in one place. So that's in year 22-23. Weight room, equipment. Obviously, we're hoping that the Healthy Life Center would pass, but the fact that it didn't, we do need to replace, this equipment, and so this is something that will be coming up in the next few years. So, car park bathhouse, we are going to be demolishing, this, and then replacing it with a shelter and a restroom, and then we'll be putting some equipment out there for play and so on as well. So with this one, with the Lowhead Dam and with the channels for fish passage and for canoe and kayaks and tubes. With that happening, just want to point out that we do have, several projects that are be coming up for North River Valley. One of them, you can kind of see where the parking is, and this is in an up-to-date picture. A lot more work has been done, but you can kind of see where the parking is, and then you can see where the shelter is, and then just to the bottom of the shelter is a piece of play equipment. What we really want to do is we actually have money in the CIP to replace the parking, also to put a new shelter in and new play equipment. But what we want to do is we want to put the parking more to the south or the bottom of the picture, and then have the shelter and the playground to the north of the parking. So right now, if we left everything as is, if kids or people wanted to move from the shelter or the play equipment down to the water, they would have to cross the parking area. So it's just something that we want to do as well. If we move on to page 129, the downtown plaza, I'm not going to spend really any time on this because there's a public input meeting on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. The Confluence will be going through more in detail the concept and what that's proposed to look like. And then we'll be bringing more information to council next Tuesday, the 26th. With Ada Hayden, again, this is another project that we put in last year. There is a group out there called Access Ada Hayden. So this is a canoe and kayak access. You can see you can put your canoe or kayak in that picture on the left, slide it down to the water, and then you can see for people with disabilities, mobility issues, they can do those kind of steps, get out and over their kayak, and then lower themselves into the kayak, and you can see an individual doing coming back in from after being out on the water. So right now with that, we do have $85,000 in the budget. 50,000 of that is local option sales tax, and 35,000 of it is from private donations. And just before the holidays, I did speak with that group, and as of right now, they have raised about $22,000 out of their 35. So they're well on their way and continuing to do that. So again, it's a really good partnership between the city and another group out there to get this accomplished. So playground equipment improvements, this is Sunset Ridge that was put in, last year. And on this page, there are 17 playground replacements that are on that page over the 5 years. And this is something, again, we do have a plan that goes out into about 2040, to replace all of our playground equipment. If we go to the Furman Aquatic Center, one of the projects, the first ones that will be coming up is this play structure in the splash pool. Needs to be refurbished every so often. The chlorine starts raising havoc on the colors, the plastic. So what they'll actually do is they'll come in, they'll take a lot of these components, take it back to their shop, refurbish them, bring them back, put them back together. At Furman, we also about every 7 to 8 years we do need to repaint the pool basins, so that's in this. And then also we're going to be replacing the light fixtures on the pool deck as well. So Municipal Pool, with this one, again, we have had money every year for capital projects that come up. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot that will or it has come up that we've needed to take care of. Nothing major, some smaller things we have had to replace. But at the end of 2021, we should have about $197,000 in that budget to be used for repairs as needed. And just again, that is set to be replaced or demoed in about March of 2022 is when that's going to be taken care of. Obviously, with the Indoor Aquatic Center, we'll be bringing more information to you next Tuesday as well. The ADA transition plan improvements, we're working on getting that audit done of all of our facilities, and then we will be what we do in the CIP have $25,000 a year earmarked to do projects from that plan. Homewood Golf Course, if you get a chance, go by the golf course and see the progress on the clubhouse. It's looking great. Still on track to open by April 1st when we when we open up the course. But one of the projects that we have here is this bridge. It's hole 9, takes you from the tee box to the green area. We replace this with a bridge that carts will be able to go over, and also replace it with a more secure and safe bridge. With the Ames ISU Ice Arena, a couple of projects, coming up. One is replacing the lobby flooring. We have to do that every so often, about every 12 years or so. And then water heaters, something really exciting to be done as well. War Memorial Park, we still have money earmarked to put a bridge over Squaw Creek that would connect War Memorial Park, the developed part of it, and then to the left of Squaw Creek is another area. We're actually working with Water Plan, WPC on that, and maybe doing some nutrient reduction activities over there on that side in the near future. Eventually, then there would be a path that would go up Shoal Road all the way to Ontario. Rose Prairie, for the holidays, obviously there was a topic of discussion with what's going to happen there. Currently, we still in the developer's plan to have about a 5-acre park for a neighborhood park. So we do have in year 5 of the CIP, $200,000 to develop that neighborhood park. So any questions about anything related to Parks and Recreation CIP?
I'll start off. Go ahead.
Keith, what is the relationship, if any, between the ADA assessment and the playground equipment replacement.
So with that, what we have been doing with all of our equipment replacement, what we've been doing is putting a concrete border around, and you can see that in the picture of there. So that what this does is this makes it accessible from either a sidewalk, a parking lot. We put a path and that border around the playground. Right now, with most of the playgrounds, we do have engineered wood fibers, which is ADA compliant. So those are some things that we're doing. The ADA plan, the audit that we're doing, will identify other issues that we may have. In a lot of cases right now with our playgrounds, we just have timbers around the playgrounds, which are not accessible. So this is something even ahead of the audit that we're doing. Now, if your question relates more to making all of our playgrounds more accessible, such as the inclusive playground up at Innis Grove, then we would have to increase the amount of money in our in those projects quite a bit to increase the number of accessible components to those playgrounds.
I was actually just thinking of the equipment and whether there would be the opportunity to add one or two pieces of more accessible equipment in some of the parks as it's determined that might be desirable. So you've answered my question.
All right.
Tim?
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Keith. Great presentation. On page 130, you've got the Ada Hayden path replacements. And I want to just sort of start us thinking about the topic. Ada Hayden has been more successful than anyone could have imagined. And with developments likely going into the north, there has to be some kind of projection that there will only be increased pressure on Ada Hayden. Some of our larger metropolitan parks, they will have 2 lanes for the path, one for walkers and the other for cyclists. At what point, in terms of utilization of the park, I mean, there's already tension right now between people who want to ride their bike and those who want to walk. At what point do we start thinking about expanding the width of the path and then just running a strip to demarc that?
So that actually is in the plan. What we're looking at, and we have had conversations already. We've spoken with the traffic engineer to give us some ideas, and we may even do something prior to the path replacement. So the goal with part of the projects that are in year 4 and year 5 is to actually widen the path, go to concrete versus asphalt, and then do exactly what you said. And one of the things we may even do is put the stripe down ahead of time, just to make some delineation. And we have had some conversation with Ames Bicycle Coalition to get a little bit of feedback from them in regards to what might be the best way to do that. You have pedestrians on the inside or the outside, bicyclists on the other side of it. So those are things that we are discussing currently.
I think it's fantastic. If you have a chance to see the lakes up in Minneapolis where this is done, people are pretty respectful of those lanes, and I think it's increased the safety when you've got both types of users. The second and final question I had on page 137, we've got the bridge at Moore Park, and I know time goes fast, but it just seems like it's forever until that pedestrian bridge would be installed. I think that bridge would be a huge addition to connecting 2 amazing parks. is that, are those dates sort of constraints that your department has in terms of just being able to offer the staffing to engineer and put this together? Or is there a place where, as a council, if we wanted as a policy matter to see that advance faster, I mean, we're not looking at engineering or designing until 24, 25. So I want to be sensitive. We have to look at these projects in light of all the things you have on your plate. But could you speak to the issue of the timing of that project?
Yeah, there's two things that that will obviously need to happen. So one, we have been having conversations with the university, and those conversations with COVID have slowed down, you know, a little bit. And so one, working with the university to make that happen. And because we do have some property, which is the city of Ames, other property will have to go across will be the universities. And the other component is trying to tie it in with just the plan that we have for paths, is to try to coordinate that, because this will be a pretty lengthy path and have a lot of cost to it. So it's not only the bridge, because we don't want a bridge that just goes to nowhere. So it's trying to coordinate getting the path done. So once it's all done, you have that connection right away. So those are a couple of components that we're trying to balance with this project.
And so that's very helpful. So if Iowa State re-engaged and that process developed, and then we can combine that with some advancements of the trails, is it possible that those projects could be moved up faster? I didn't realize those were the constraints.
Yeah, and I think that is a possibility. So how about what we do is over this next year, we'll have more conversation with the university. We'll see if we can what we can do from the path aspect, and we can bring this back to council. And when we're doing our CIP for next year, if we're able to advance it, then that's what we'll do.
Well, I'm only one member of the council, but I truly think this would be a terrific addition to our system. Being able to tie those together, it would be wonderful. So thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions for Keith? Keith, I just had one question on back to Tim's question on the path at Ada Hayden. There's also a lot of people that do rollerblading.
Yeah.
You know, around there. How does that work? Do they have a separate lane for that too, or do they have to share with the bicycles?
We were in the conversations we've had is we were looking at bicycles, rollerblades, skateboards, but all kind of some of those wheeled activities would share the same lane, and then pedestrians would share the other.
Very good. Thank you.
And then just the last one, if there aren't any other about Parks and Recreation, you know, the cemetery on page 142, you know, we do have, you know, the pavilion. You can see the plan that City Council had approved a while back. That pavilion is coming up, and then we also are trying to look at some things that we can do to enhance the Ontario Cemetery. And with that wall, if you've ever been, there's a large retaining wall. We want to do some landscaping above that. And then also eventually we want to replace some fencing. We just have kind of chain link fence, and we're really looking to go to more of a decorative fence like we have at Ames Municipal Cemetery. So a couple projects there as well.
Questions for Keith on this one? Keith, is this going to be installed by your own staff? Is that $75,000 in the budget just for their just for materials, or?
Yes, it'll be materials. It'll be concrete. So a lot of what you see, benches, some landscaping, you know, a lot of that will be included. But the goal would be that our staff would install it.
Because it's a very attractive addition to that area, and certainly long overdue. But it just seemed like the $75,000 seemed to be fairly modest for, the beautiful concept. So I was just curious if the budget went over, I presume you have resources to draw upon to make up that difference to accomplish the project.
Let's hope so.
Okay. Anything else for Keith? Outstanding. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate
Thank
your
you so
time.
much. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Mr. Dunn, and council will be pages 48 to 58 and 60 to 66. John?
Good afternoon. And I'm trying to share my screen, but I'm getting a message saying the host has disabled participant screen sharing. There we go. Now I got it. So it's my privilege to share with you our plan for capital investments in water and pollution control over the next 5 years. And before I start on the projects, I want to just give you an introduction to the individuals who actually make these projects come to life. So nearly all of these projects are going to be administered by one of these 4 individuals. Neil Weiss, our assistant director, Chris Evans and Ashley Giesman, who are our environmental engineering team, and Dustin Albrecht, environmental specialist. They're going to be the ones who not only start with the conceptualization of these projects, they're doing the cost estimating that goes in the CIP. They're seeing it from design through bidding, through construction, and then all the way through the warranty closeout. So none of this would happen without these folks. So I just needed to give them some credit for what they accomplish. I'm going to start for you on page 48 in the drinking water production and treatment side. And the first project here is our water plant facility improvements. This is just a collection of major maintenance and equipment activities in the facility. I want to highlight one particular project, and that's the addition of new high service pumps at the new water treatment plant. Our intention all along had been to get 15 million gallon per day capacity of pumping at the site to match the capacity of the treatment plant. The constraint was that the water distribution system on East 13th Street was never designed and never had a reason to be designed to handle that much water. And so the original construction just allowed for the capacity that the existing distribution system could accommodate. And then Public Works has some projects under design right now that when completed will allow us to put the next 2 pumps in so we could go from a 5 to a 10 million gallon per day capacity. And then about 8 years further out in our capital planning, there'll be another project by Public Works followed by another set of pumps going in at the facility to ultimately get us to that 15 million gallons per day. So that's just one example of several I'm going to show you of how projects from multiple departments are all kind of interwoven together. Page 49 is our distribution system monitoring network. This is going to allow us to do real-time monitoring of multiple locations in the distribution system. Right now, there's just a handful of spots that we can see, and getting more data points coming in will allow us to detect water main breaks quicker. By triangulating between multiple sensors, we can pinpoint down quicker where the location of a main break might be. And it'll also, in the event of a major main break, allow us to be quicker and more precise in delineating boundaries around where a boil water advisory might be needed. Page 50 is our well field standby power. This is a project that you've seen for a few years, but in response to the derecho, we are accelerating that by a year. What this is going to give us is dedicated standby power in the youth sports complex well field. So there'll be a single generator goes in that will be able to drive at least 3 of the 5 wells in that well field. In a separate project, we hope to be bidding later this summer, construction of a new well field up in North River Valley Park. And as a part of the construction of that well field, a standby generator will go in dedicated that will power those 3 wells in addition. And so that will give us 6 of our largest capacity wells that are under dedicated standby power. And then in addition, we're looking to install quick connects in the well field that sits behind the Super Walmart and Target down on South Duff. And so that will allow us then to bring in portable generation to power those wells in addition. Page 51 is our project for doing the automatic meter reading conversion. The big highlight here, you'll notice that the cost is down from what we showed a year ago. That's because we've shifted a portion of those meters out of the capital plan and into the operating budget. Our intention at the end of this project is that the CIP page can go away and the operating budget can continue at a level funding. And as we were looking and evaluating that this time around, we decided we needed to reallocate a few more meters into the operating budget. So there's a cost decrease in the CIP, and then in a few weeks, you'll see a corresponding cost increase in the operating budget for the meter division. Page 52 is a project to run fiber optic communication cables to our remote sites. So we'll be connecting wells, pump stations, elevated tanks. That'll allow us to have more reliable communications with those facilities, more secure communication with them, and it will allow us to do more things from a security perspective in terms of access control, monitoring cameras, all of those types of things. But I really wanted to highlight the fact that the water utility would not be able to cost effectively do this without the ability to piggyback on one of John Joyner's projects, and that's the Intelligent Transportation Project. So when John's sharing that one a little bit later in the evening, look favorably on it because it's got real benefits for us as well. Page 53 is a planned pump addition to the pump station that sits at the intersection of State and Mortensen. As the community has continued to grow to the west and the southwest, more and more of our water is going through that pump station. And so just for reliability and dependability of service, we're looking to provide a 4th pump there and also install dedicated standby power into that booster pump station. Page 54 is the East Industrial Park elevated tank. We are delaying that project 1 year so that we can stay on the same schedule following the installation of the water and sewer lines in that area. But this is a project that, depending on the pace of development in the park and also on the type of development that may occur in what order, we can either accelerate or delay this project as needed to match the needs out there. Page 55 is our periodic monitoring of the water quality up at Ada Hayden. It is a 2-year back-to-back monitoring event that we scheduled to take place every 5 years. And it's really doing an in-depth review of the condition of the 3 wetland complexes and both lakes. Late last calendar year, there was a conversation about some of the planned development in the watershed and the frequency of the monitoring of the health of the wetlands. Since we've had that conversation, Neil has been having discussions with Prairie Rivers of Iowa as they're putting together their 10-year water quality monitoring plan. And we're working with them to try to get this area included in their monitoring plan as well, so that in between our intensive monitoring events, we can continue to get some snapshots of what the conditions of the wetlands and the lakes are periodically as well. Page 56 is some improvements to our lime storage lagoons. This is where we store and dewater the residuals from the lime softening process until we can get into farm fields in the fall. We currently recycle 100% of that material as agricultural lime. We're showing in this project a delay of 2 years of a major subdivision of that. And it's partly just trying to keep pace with the need for that. The new water plant has been a little more efficient. The amount of lime residuals being generated is not quite as large. And also for workload reasons too, we're just trying to balance the need and the workload. So we're recommending that being delayed 2 years from what we showed you a year ago. Page 57 is a wells control rehabilitation. About a year ago, we started a project on 10 wells where we went in and replaced the radios and the programmable logic controllers. And now we're following up with that with the balance of our well inventory. So we found that more than 10 years and the PLCs reach a point where we can't get repair parts. That's kind of where we are right now. The PLCs we have are out of production. They're out of support by the manufacturer, and just the availability of spare parts, even going to places like eBay and Amazon, we just can't find those anymore. So it's clearly time for us to get those replaced. And then page 58, the last on the drinking water side, is the demolition of the Squaw Creek pump station. You might remember this was in the CIP 2 years ago. And last year, just ahead of CIP, we had an indication that there may be a commercial entity interested in buying that property. When that sale did not move forward, we've made the decision now to go ahead and reinsert this back into the capital plan. So that's everything on the drinking water side. Now we'll slide down south and look at projects related to the water pollution control facility.
Hey, John, we just
Sure.
pop back in and see if council has any questions on the water side, then we'll go to the WPC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions for John?
I have one question, and it relates to the Squaw Creek Booster Pump Station demolition. Has there been any further contact with the neighborhood people who are interested in purchasing that?
Yeah, we have not received any inquiries. I can tell you honestly, we haven't reached out to see if any of that interest is still there either. I do think that it would be something that we should be doing before we go ahead and tear that facility down.
Well, I think the neighborhood would appreciate it, just because I think they were interested in finding a use for that property that could enhance the neighborhood community. Of course, then COVID hit, and who knows what that community means right now.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree with you entirely.
Any other questions for John? John, I had just two quick questions. One is, so in your plan, if we lose power from the power plant, we will be able to provide not full-fledged 100% water capacity, but through the backup power on the wells. I presume you have generators at the water plant. You can continue to replenish or keep the water towers filled to avoid a catastrophic loss of water. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, that is our intent.
Yeah.
And I should have mentioned when I touched on that generator project, we show it in the CIP with a majority of the funding coming from a hazard mitigation grant. And we have already started that grant application process. A lot of details to work through, but the initial indication is it should be a fundable project for us.
Thank you. And then the other one is on the water tower project. I know that we're still getting water and sewer out there. I think they're taking bids or have taken bids on that. But if I know that the type of buildings that are going to go in out there may require sprinkler service. And so if the tower isn't built, will there be adequate water pressure initially to provide service and or water pressure without the water tower?
I think that's really going to be dependent on what the customer nature is. If it's a facility that's all one level and it's not handling a lot of flammable materials, certainly. If it's a big multi-story operation that's handling a lot of combustibles, they would probably want that tower as quickly as we could get it up. It start to finish, getting a water tower erected would take us about 18 months. So if the need would arise, that's how long it would take us to get that tower in place.
And would that also include the engineering and bidding process, or is that in addition to that?
No, that would include the engineering. The engineering design for water towers, other than the footing design, is really dependent on who the successful bidder is. They all have their own construction methods. So in a lot of ways, it's almost a design build type of an operation.
Because I was just wondering, you show in 23, 24, the engineering, and then 24, 25, the rest of engineering, which I presume is probably on-site observation, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
And then the construction. I just didn't know if, and I have no working knowledge, but could you actually design it ahead of time and have it basically in the queue so that it could be bid pretty quickly if we had someone come and say that they wanted to come to Ames, but they needed, water tower pressure, or how would that work?
Yeah, I think conceivably we could. We've got the property already purchased, so we know what the soil types are going to be and what the elevation is going to be. So we could do that in advance.
Well, I might just suggest, thinking maybe about that to get it in the queue, because we're obviously that'd be a council decision and a vote, but I just would suggest that to get us ready, because we don't want to have any other hiccups or delays that might preempt us from being able to get an industry out there who we want to get planted out there. So, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, good thought.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Page 59.
Yeah, and the first project I have for you is on page 60. This is the facility improvements for the water pollution control plant. Again, just a collection of equipment repairs, maintenance, replacements. There's two new elements that you have not seen in the past that are included in the mix this time. One is the addition of some chemical corrosion control at the lift station that sits at South Dayton and Highway 30. And then the other is the replacement of the atomic absorption spectrophotometer at the water plant, moving into the 5th year of the CIP. Page 61 is our watershed-based nutrient reduction project. This is a project that we are trying to do these projects on our own. We're looking for partners, people who are already doing things in the watershed that we can help partner up with, and in some cases bring some technical expertise to move projects forward. In some cases, it may be just an issue of having some local or matching funds to go towards federal grants or other programs that are needed to help getting projects moving forward. But we are working with partners with the Squaw Creek Watershed Management Authority. We're working with Prairie Rivers of Iowa, Story County Conservation, with the Iowa Soybean Association, and most recently some new partnerships that we're working on with Ducks Unlimited and with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Some of the types of projects that we're looking at trying to support would be the construction of wetlands, some oxbow restorations. With the Soybean Association, what we've really been focused on this last year is supporting cover crops on farm fields. And in fact, the Soybean Association has reported to us that from the program from this past summer, that we were able to remove more than 60,000 pounds of nitrogen that would have otherwise been released into the river, and just shy of 4,000 pounds of phosphorus that have been released. And just as a reminder, these are projects that once we get our agreement with the state finalized, that we'll be able to bank all of those pounds as a credit towards any future tightening of nutrient standards at the wastewater treatment plant. And in addition, these are projects that depending on the type of project, are generating some flood mitigation credits, maybe some habitat restoration, some recreational opportunities through fishing or hunting, some drinking water source protection. So multiple benefits being layered on for each of these projects. Page 62 is the nutrient reduction modifications that will happen at the treatment plant. No change to the plan here. Just a reminder that our goal that we're trying to accomplish is to achieve the targets for total nitrogen and total phosphorus reduction set in the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy within a period of 20 years. So it's going to happen in a series of 3 discrete construction projects over the course of 20 years. And what that gives us is really 2 main benefits. One is it lets us spread out the cost impact and the impact on rates to our customers over a period of 20 years, as opposed to having to swallow that whole cost at one time. The other thing that it gives us is the ability to make incremental capacity improvements to the plant. You know, normally when you're doing an upgrade to a facility, you don't get to pick up another fractional million gallons per day. But since we're doing this in 3 phases over 20 years, that gives us 3 bites at a capacity apple over the next 20 years. So we don't have to guess right up front what the capacity is that we're going to need 20 years down the road. We can grow into it as we need it. Page 63 is our cogeneration system. The change in this project from what you had seen originally is that instead of planning to replace our methane generator number 2 during the 5-year period, we've changed to just doing a major overhaul and a rebuild on that cogen set and deferring the replacement of that unit by 5 years. We've had a couple different consulting engineers tell us that long-term, they think cost-effectively, that's a much better choice for us. So we've made that alteration to that project. 64 is our electrical system maintenance. This is one of the projects that's not real flashy, but it's really important. These aren't the types of equipment that you could just walk into an electrical wholesale shop and pick up off the shelf. So we go in every 5 years and have a contractor clean out the cabinets. They inspect the bus bars for corrosion. They make sure all the lugs are tight. They do thermal imaging looking for failing insulation. Really important to maintain the continuity and livelihood of the facility. Page 65 is a headworks modification project. This is inside the raw water pump station. Probably the most challenging environment in the plant for electrical and mechanical systems. And this is a scheduled plan replacement of the grit removal units, of the bar screens, and then a lot of piping, valves, and all of that type of work that will be needed in that facility. And then our final project is an analogous one to what we saw in the water plant, but it's piggybacking on that intelligent transportation CIP project to be able to extend fiber to our wastewater lift stations. So the photo there is our recently reconstructed lift station that sits just off the west end of Orchard Drive. But we're going to get all those same benefits of improved reliability and security of the systems by being able to move to fiber for the communication. So to wrap up, I just wanted to share this quote. This is on the backside of the monument when you leave the new water treatment plant. Here's your explanation as to why we're looking at spending and investing $37 million in these facilities over the next 5 years. It's that water is the lifeblood of our bodies, our economy, our nation, and our well-being. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any additional questions that you might have for us.
Any questions for John? Well done. Thank you, John.
Thank you for your time this evening.
All right, we're going to move on to John Joyner tonight. We got council. We're going to start on page 68, and he'll walk us through up to page 81 to start with.
Yep, thank you, Mayor and Council. As we get started tonight, I'd like to thank McKinley Rigger, Damien Pregitzer, Tracy Peterson, Bill Schmidt, and Justin Clausen for their hard work in putting these plans and programs together and then in carrying them out. And as we get started in the presentation tonight, as we've done the last few years, we have a brief video that just highlights some of the construction accomplishments from last year. So we'll see if we can get that rolling here real quick. Well, McKinley, maybe we just go into the slides and we can play that later, or we can put it up on the Facebook for people to view later. So we start out in the utilities section, and our first program is the water system improvements. So that program is on page 68. Then next in the utilities program, we have our sanitary sewer activities. So we have three programs under this. The sanitary sewer system improvements. This is our larger improvement project based on the findings of the sanitary sewer system evaluation. And we have the clear water diversion program. It's another annual program that tries to get clear water out of the sanitary sewers. And then the one program I'd like to highlight that's on the next slide is the East 13th Street Sanitary Sewer Extension. So this would extend sanitary sewer from Dayton Avenue east across the interstate through the regional commercial area and then through to the eastern limit of the industrial area that's east of the regional commercial. So as you see in the CIP on page 71, that this would be financed through TIF abated GO bonds. So we would have a TIF district created with the first buildings that go up out there so that the utility or the general tax base wouldn't have to pay for this project. So next in utilities, we move into the stormwater program. You can see shown there that there's a variety of annual programs that we have. Stormwater erosion control and stormwater improvement program, stormwater quality improvements, and then some specific projects that I'd like to highlight include the low point drainage on page 75. So this program is intended to address areas that are mainly in the right of way or other public type areas that have poor drainage and are causing flooding and other area difficulties. So as you can see here, we have 6 different areas identified for the 21-22 fiscal year of the program. Then next, we have the stormwater detention retention maintenance program. So the name would appear new to you, but the program isn't. This used to be the stormwater facility improvement program. So we've just tried to rename this to be more accurate and reflective of the work that we have going on under this program. So the project that we have planned for 21-22 is on George W. Carver. If you were to go west on Bloomington and then start around the curve towards Gilbert, that pond is in the Northridge Heights southwest corner there. Then the last program that I wanted to highlight in the storm sewer program is the Skunk River improvements. That's on page 79, and this is a new program. The first year in 21-22, what we're trying to do here is take a look at the southeast 16th bridge and the flow capacity that we have through and above that bridge in the roadway. The DOT is planning in the next few years to make capacity improvements on Highway 30 for the Skunk River underneath those Highway 30 bridges. So we thought that we should take a look at the capacity issues, if any, in the southeast 16th and Skunk River area, and see if there's any improvements that can be made to help facilitate the flow of the Skunk River through that area. Then in the third year, if we just jump ahead to that year, Tracy, if you're on and able to jump in and chime in, maybe you want to just briefly go over what we're looking at in that year.
Sure. So as John mentioned, this is a new program. And what we are looking at for that third year is in partnership with Water and Pollution Controls project that's SRF funded. There's the water quality grant opportunities that can come with those. And so to not negatively impact larger flows downstream with the increased capacity under the Highway 30, we're looking at watershed improvements to deal with both flood reduction and water quality in that area between East 13th and Southeast 16th. So that is a third year project for $2.1 million. And again, that would be an SRF grant as we would move towards that. So that could include, disconnecting the pipes along East 13th that drain 266 acres that could go into a stormwater wetland. That's an example of what we could do that would then improve the water quality and flood reduction in the South Skunk River watershed.
All right, thank you. Then rounding out the utilities, we have resource recovery. So the one CIP sheet that we have for resource recovery in this proposed CIP is the larger annual maintenance projects that we have identified every year in the plant. So that rounds out the utility section. Next, we move into transportation.
John, can we just pause a second and see if there's any questions on utilities?
Absolutely.
Any questions for John?
John, I'm wondering about page 75, the low point drainage improvements. A lot of these are in my ward, so I know a lot of the problems that have led to these improvements being necessary. What's the logic in the order in which the projects are being done? Are those in conjunction with other things that are being done in the same area, or is there something else there?
Tracy, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So a lot of these came out of the 6-inch rainfalls that we had in 2016 and 18. And several of them are coordinated with roadway reconstruction projects as well. So some of those that you see in that low point drainage, there are road reconstruction projects that we're currently working on as well. And so those will be partnered with those. Some are standalone and some are, there's a large scale of more complex to much simpler, like the one on East Lincoln Way. We're thinking it's probably a trench grade across the, East Lincoln Way with our frontage road. So some of them are more complex and some are more simple, but that is how we prioritize those.
Thank you.
Other questions for Tracy? John or Tracy.
So,
Tim, go ahead.
well, so we have spent a tremendous amount of money over my tenure on council on surface water, and I think it's fascinating. Quick question. So is there a way for a community like ours to be able to rate? Are we getting better at surface water? I was really interested by an analogy Damien shared with us a couple years ago that roads could be rated in terms of A, B, C, D on their safety. Does the modeling that the city performed, does it allow us to evaluate if in fact we're making progress on how we're handling surface water?
So yes, I think we are. I don't have numbers to back this. There's several different ways. We've done stream assessments, and so we could do an updated stream assessment to analyze the erosion in our streams and river. And then there's also the you heard John Dunn mention the pounds of nutrients that are also going downstream or that we've pulled off by doing the improvements. We are going to be kicking off the storm water system analysis here this year. We've been doing the surveying portion because we needed to get the survey grade information of our storm sewer systems. And so we'll be doing some analysis looking at capacity, and that's a lot of that surface water. Is it getting into the intakes? Is it over, the 6-inch rain? Is that too much to handle? But that's more of a 100-year, and we say we're going to manage a 5 to 10 year in our stormwater system. So there's different aspects to surface water that come into play. So there's not a whole, one size fits all answer to as far as the ABCD that we have with the transportation system. So there's components of it. You can really look at, do we have a healthy environment? If you look at our streams, is there clean water? Is there stabilized? And is it habitat friendly? Or is it really eroded? And when we have a flood, then it takes another 10 feet of stream bank down, and then the nutrients are attached to that, and it's just washing downstream. So if you see the Southeast 16th area, the river just north of Southeast 16th, it's continuing to meander and cut through, and so it's unstable and really eroded. But you look at an area like College Creek, where we stabilized that in 2010, and there's the ability for the habitat to be recovering and the clean water. And so as soon as we fixed that project, and did the work there, the water became much clearer pretty quick.
I appreciate that. It may just be something to keep in mind that if you ever come across a tool that would allow us as a council to start thinking about when we spend millions of dollars of our money, and then when we ask developers who are going to redevelop a piece of property to make significant investments in surface water aspects of the project, it would just be helpful to know, are we moving the needle? I guess that's really the heart of what my question is about, is are there ways in which we could quantify that? And there may not be, but it's something to think about if you come across a way to help this council or future councils be able to think about that. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think unfortunately we let the system get too degraded before starting to make changes, and so it takes longer to start seeing the recovery. And that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Rowan, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question about the East 13th expansion. Is that dependent on, I know we're hoping to finance it with TIFs, or, we're hoping that we get a development there. I see that's in the first year of the CIP. Is that, are we sure that project's gonna go through, or if it doesn't, or if there's a holdup in the timing of that project, will we delay the extension of sanitary sewer out there?
Yeah, this would be dependent on negotiation with the developer and getting a development agreement in place. so we know that they're committed to the building, they're committed to a certain value, that we can go ahead and get that TIF district created.
Okay.
Then that property valuation that they commit to, and then the TIF that's generated from that is what's used to pay for the sewer.
Good. Okay. I just want to confirm that if for some reason there weren't a project, we wouldn't still expend that.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Other questions for John or Tracy? Just a quick comment, John, on page 16, at least on our draft books, we have on page 69 under East 13th Street Sanitary Sewer Extension, our book shows $2.5 million, and you showed, I think it shows 2.7 on the next, on page 71. So I don't know if that just you can get that caught, or they can get that caught when they're doing the.
Yeah, I thank you for pointing that out. I think the version that's going to be is going to be online has been corrected to show the 2.7 million, and finance is aware and has made those adjustments to the 2.7.
Thank you.
Thank you for catching that.
Yeah, and then Tracy, I'm intrigued by the Dunk River project. Is there opportunities there to actually make some enhancements that would be recreational in nature? That would be, I don't mean like, lighting and, but I mean, I think there's bike trails, walking paths, overlooks, things that could be, I mean, obviously we don't have beaches and mountains here, but we do have, streams. And so there are opportunities to really capture that and turn into a feature that would either be for, I was part of a mayor's meeting a week ago, and we actually had quite a presentation on the water trails in Polk County. And there's a huge consortium. They're going to be spending tens and tens of millions of dollars to I think have like 81 different launching points along the Des Moines River and other locations. And so it just kind of got the wheels spinning, thinking, are there opportunities that we could look at? I know it kind of runs dry at times, but just curious, would that be part and parcel of the project, or is that something that you haven't thought about or looked at yet, or is that really outside the scope of this kind of a project?
So the South Skunk River is a designated water trail already. So it does bring with it an opportunity. We have a access point at Southeast 16. DNR has approached us before that they have grant opportunities where we could apply for that and enhance that access point. And then we're talking with the landowners that are the landowner between Southeast 16th and East Lincoln Way, and already have that carried over with the budget to do some river stabilization through there, and the Skunk River Trail extend through that area. I don't know if you've driven by the new wetlands on South 5th Street. Let's get the right street. South 5th Street, we have a massive new wetland. And so we could do something similar down here with wetlands, and then do trails or walking paths, or and then access to the river once it's enhanced with stabilized measures, and then more planting so that habitat is better. It can be a focal point and access to draw people more down there.
Well, I think it's interesting. There's a huge investment going in down there, and they're really trying to capitalize on that. I know Ankeny's included in that, but I think Ankeny may be connecting to Mud Creek, I think, honestly, and they're not necessarily that excited about that because it apparently isn't very wide or very deep. But just thinking, as this winds down closer to the Des Moines area, it'd be nice to see if we could somehow make that connection and really enhance our opportunities as a destination for a living and recreation too.
Yeah, and just here on the left of this screen, that is going to already be enhanced with our flood mitigation project. So all of that habitat area, we're going to create a 2-stage channel, do some pocket wetlands within that 2-stage channel where there will be able to be some better vegetation and some better habitat. So it really will change the appearance from that South Dove area, which just connects right into that South Skunk River.
Thank you.
And so, John, you know, I mean, we've got the trail there now that extends for a good part of that along the west side of the river. And I don't, maybe we'll be looking at this later to look at when we add the additional, it's planned to extend the multi-use trail from East Lincoln Way down to Southeast 16th, which there's nothing there right now. But you're absolutely right. That's going to be a terrific addition to the system.
Well, even I don't know if it's feasible, but connecting even to maybe you're already in that plan and is to Lowhead Dam, area too. I don't know if I just think that it may be an opportunity to really, further enhance the area and get a win-win, accomplish the, some flood mitigation as well as improve. If fishing habitat is possible, or if there's, I'm thinking about kayaking. And kayaking was a big thing on the water trails. I mean, it was huge in terms of potential revenue and for kayak rentals, as well as drawing people to the community. So anyway.
Yeah, so I am continuing conversations with the landowner between East Lincoln Way and Southeast 16th as far as easements there. We have a trail from East Lincoln Way up to the Lowhead Dam already. We've talked about looking at the at-grade crossing to do something different, maybe at the East 13th to separate that grade at some time in the future that would make that even a safer ride. So yeah, having that full connection, and you have an access point at Southeast 16th, and you have an access point, up in the River Valley Park. So using that as a water trail would be much more optimistic for people to use that, if it was enhanced.
Thank you.
I know I've asked this before, but it's related to the water trail. And I love what we've done with the conversion of the dam at East River Valley. The other dam, the one that's right by Lincoln Way on Squaw Creek, are there eventual plans to do this same thing, or is that, yeah?
We already did something with that one. It's not a Lowhead Dam, it's a grade control structure. It was cheap piling. And if you remember, we had received FEMA funds to protect an existing water main there and to stabilize the creek banks. And at that time, we made that safer and did some Municipal Pools and benched the bank and made that safer so that people could go around. We notched a weir in that sheet pile. There was an analysis done working with FEMA whether to remove that grade structure, and it was determined that it was best to keep it, but to make that area safer for the water users. And so we have done that with that project a few years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Tracy and John. Okay, moving on to transportation.
Starting off in the transportation program, we have street improvements. So I'd like to highlight the first 4 programs you see there individually, but before we do that, then we have the Seal Coat street improvements on page 91. That program is specifically targeted towards local streets and repairing those. We have the downtown street improvements on page 92. If you turn to that page, you'll see that that program is kind of winding down. I believe the 2020 or 21-22 program is the alley by Burger King and Harold Pike. And then rounding out the first year 21-22 projects, our annual right-of-way restoration. That's where we come in behind the projects and restore the area that we've just improved the street. So the first one I want to highlight individually is the arterial street pavement improvements on page 87. So the location you can see here is by Sawyer School. We're beginning in Ontario, the first block east from North Dakota to Woodstock, and then North Dakota from Ontario up to the UP tracks. Then for Collector Street pavement improvements, that's on page 88. We'll be doing Hoover from 24th Street to Tapa Hollow. Bob Kindred was always fond of pointing out, or amazed at pointing out, when locations would roll around twice in his career. And this was one of the first projects I worked on here, was realigning 30th Street in Hoover. So this is at least the second time that in my career I've seen this area. Then next on page 89, we have concrete pavement improvements. We'll be doing 4 different locations. So we have Stang Road from the Vinker driveway to 24th Street, and then 24th Street over to the railroad tracks. We'll also be doing a portion of North 2nd Street and about a 1-block section of South Kellogg. Next on page 90, we have asphalt street improvements. So under this program, we'll be getting several areas, many different areas around town. So 3 of those areas will be kind of in the Southdale area of Opal Drive, Opal Circle, Turquoise Circle. And then moving north again, we've got Harcourt and Tapa Hollow Road. So from there, we move into the shared use path portion of the transportation program. Some of the annual programs we have here, the multimodal roadway improvements, shared use path maintenance. There's been a great focus on joint maintenance under that program. And then the one program I want to highlight would be the shared use path expansion. But before we do that, the next slide shows a summary of all the different locations within our CIP that we're making shared use path improvements. And a few years ago, we were directed by council to have our 5-year average be at least $1.2 million per year. And as you see here, we're over 1.5 million. So continuing to meet that council goal. So the shared use path expansion, we have 2 locations planned for that in 21, 22. We have a continuation of the south of Lincoln Way path. So that path will eventually connect Beetle Drive to the Arboretum area. We have one, the most western section under contract. This 21-22 would complete the middle section. And then we have the eastern section along with the Baker subdivision improvements. Also in shared use path expansion for this first year of the program, we'll be looking at the Squaw Creek Trail that would connect South Duff back over to the hopefully not too far in the future Skunk River Trail from Southeast 16th to East Lincoln Way. Next, we move into traffic improvements. So we have traffic signal program, and I don't have a specific individual slide for this, but the background of this slide shows the location for that improvement. It'll be South 4th Street and University Boulevard. Accessibility enhancement is another annual program where we try to make roadway improvements for the mobility of all users, particularly those that have mobility difficulties. And our regional count program, continuing with that. And then you'll see it's in the 3rd year, but we, although The policy committee of the MPO just approved the newest version of the long range plan. We have another update program in the third year of the CIP. So a couple of programs I'd like to highlight individually. On page 105, we have the Intelligent Transportation System program. So this will be the traffic communication network that will be the backbone of our traffic adaptive system. So we've previously received a grant to do phase 1. We were just informed, Damien, I think, got a letter this week from the DOT that we've received a grant for phase 2. So those grants combined, along with our design grant, are well over $2 million. So the DOT's continued to been a big supporter and a great partner in us moving forward with this program. Next, then, the other one I want to highlight individually is page 108, traffic system capacity improvements. This is a new program in the CIP, and it's driven from the most recent update to the long-range transportation plan. We identified several corridors that need to be analyzed for safety and capacity improvements. So the first one that we'll be looking at is the Grand Avenue corridor, and we'll be looking at 9th Street to 24th Street. Any questions on the shared use path or any of the traffic programs before we move on?
Any questions for John?
John, are we still receiving input from the Ames Bicycle Coalition in terms of prioritization of the projects?
Yeah, they've been a good partner and good input for us. Damien, you want to talk about any specifics? I know they meet several times a year with the leadership of ABC, but anything you want to add to that, Damien?
Yeah, we meet a couple of times a year with them, obviously, especially leading up to the creation of the CIP. They were heavily involved over the last year as we completed the long-range transportation plan update. And then every project that has some sort of significant change to either a trail or to a bike crossing, whether it be an intersection or along a segment of a road, we try to get their input from a bike user perspective to make sure that the improvement that's going in isn't only just consistent with the complete street plan, but also meets the specific needs of the way people use that corridor. So there's at least 3 major ways that we engage bike community when we do projects and planning.
Great, thank you.
Damien or John, on the intelligent transportation program or put in fiber, does that budget include going in and interconnecting with the control system at those different intersections as part of that? Or are you just running the fiber and then your connections and control systems would be done at a later date?
No, the first step and the primary purpose of the network is to connect. So our signals are connected using an old style copper communication system. This would be a modernized system that also has a central control management software. So the first phase is to connect and modernize all the traffic signals. I think some of the discussion tonight about connecting other city facilities is this project will include a lot of dark fiber, a lot of fiber that's not necessary because once you're going to go out on the street, it's cheaper to put in more strands of fiber than you need. So this project will upgrade all the traffic system, connect it, modernize it, etc. But there will be dark fiber that we can work with other city departments and the city IT, how those are connected and what that looks like.
So you're, I think somewhere I read that you're going to, maybe it's one of the projects we're doing right now, you're putting in radar versus in pavement, sensors. So is that being put in at the same time to kind of allow more free-flowing traffic? That is one of the things that, as you're aware, resident satisfaction survey is just, the stop and go on our main arterial streets.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's part of that modernization is updating a controller if it needs to be updated, updating and modernizing the detection so that if it had old style detection that maybe didn't detect bikes or had trouble detecting all modes of traffic, that gets updated And then in addition to that, you get all of the adaptive features of a modernized controller, so that some of those stop and go that you're talking about would be optimized through the computer system.
And then how about the ADA intersection improvements? Is that part of that too, or is that separate in terms of like the audible and tactile sensing announcement at the crosswalks? Is that part of that also, or how does that work?
So technically, from a funding perspective, it's separate. So the ITS program just does the technology upgrades, but what John had talked about with the accessibility enhancement program, that funds all the ramp improvements, the vibrable, tactile, audible push buttons. So if we're in the area, we might pull from a different CIP project for that location. So it happens at the same time, but it comes from different funding sources in the CIP.
I had a laugh. Is this controller actually put on a wood pallet?
Yeah, so that picture is from one of our vendors that's preparing. So what you see in that picture is what you call an ATC, like an advanced traffic control cabinet, which is just a modernized standardization of what cabinets are. And this is in their warehouse. They're prepping it for delivery to the city of Ames. So we don't put it on wooden pallets, but this is in their warehouse.
Sorry, it just caught me, just tickled my funny bone. I thought, well, that doesn't look very professional putting on a wooden pallet somewhere. But
It's a fair question. I don't think that would survive the derecho. So I think we'd want something sturdier than that.
All right. Sorry for the bunny trail there. Any other questions for John or Damien? Thank you, Damien. That was a good comment. Good comments.
So John, where do we see the extension of the bike trail on South 16th towards University? I'm on page 100. I don't see that on there. Am I missing that? I know we're working with Iowa State, the expansion of South 16th.
Yes, so, I'm trying to find the page number, but
So
that's a standalone program in the CIP, and I didn't highlight it individually because I think it's in the 4th year. But when we do those improvements, basically west of that Vet Med Trail over to University, we'll look at those accommodations along with that.
John, it's page 97.
Thank you very much.
It'll be incorporated into the project, right?
Right.
So that's a huge improvement, and I don't know if that's worth putting a footnote. If someone's looking at the expansion on page 100, they might not know to look at. I wouldn't have known to look at that, but yeah, you're right there. That's included there, but that's going to be a huge improvement to the system.
All right, John?
Okay, thank you. Then we continue in the transportation program with our street rehabilitation. So the 3 first-year programs that we have are pavement restoration. So that's pavement maintenance activities that are either the technique is too unique for our own crews to do, or maybe the project's a little too big for our crew to take on. So that's more of a pavement maintenance type program. That's on page 112. Then on page 114, we have a right-of-way appearance enhancement program. That's kind of a catch-all program. We do retaining walls, median improvements, signage. So it's really kind of a catch-all program. Then the one I wanted to highlight individually is the Main Street Sidewalk Paver Replacement Program. That is on page 113. And the mayor caught a typo that we had in the description. We had a holdover from the previous description. You remember that at one point we planned on doing colored stamped concrete. And then Justin Clausen presented a report to council on the new style pavers that we're going to use that are much more durable, much more resistant to the chemical attack from the de-icing. So we are going to use those pavers as council directed us. So That's just a typo that we'll have corrected in the description. So the plan is that we'll progress from west to east. And then as you see on the schedule there that through this summer of 2021, we hope to have all 4 of those phases bid and hopefully moving forward on construction on all of those this construction season. Any details on the schedule, Justin, that you want to add? Or
I think you've got it pretty well there, John.
Okay.
We can take questions now or at the end, however you want to do it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Then the last program we have in transportation is airport.
John, before you go any further, like on Main Street, just a quick question. If council wanted to provide like some outdoor seating areas along Main Street, outside of some of the restaurants or coffee bars or whatever, given the fact that we're looking at design the rest of this year, which I think we'd be excited to see this, brought to completion. What would be the timeline to talk about that? Would that be right away, or is that something that is too late? I'm just saying, like if you have like a like in front of Sheldon Munn, we have that larger area that's kind of shaded blue, not something that big, maybe half that size. I'm going to just say in front of Old Main for sake of discussion, just for some outdoor seating if council wanted to do that, or just a lot of conversation has to go on that. It's not just a matter of dropping that in, but with that enhanced schedule.
Yeah, I think for this program, we want to focus on getting these pavers replaced and focus on that hardscape improvement. And then I don't think that anything that we would be doing with the pavers would preclude any type of furniture streetscape. Is that right, Justin?
Correct. Most of the stuff that happens from a streetscape standpoint, benches, seating, that sort of stuff, is temporary anyhow. A lot of times it's either anchored via an adhesive, or sometimes it is physically anchored using some sort of like a drilled in screw type anchor. But I don't think any of that would preclude anything that we're doing. Really, if you think about it, what we're doing with the paver replacement is we're kind of just, it's almost like repainting your house a little bit. We're taking a broken down piece of infrastructure and making it better again, but it's not going to really change the character, I don't believe. So anything that you want to do shouldn't really preclude any timing situation there. We can work around probably anything that you're thinking as far as the timing. If it needs to coordinate with the construction, if it's during that time, that's what we're here to do, and we can certainly make that happen.
Thank you.
John, I have one other question, and maybe it's not appropriate for the CIP, maybe it is, but the inclusive crosswalks downtown, which we voted to put in back in 2019. I think we also voted to rebid that project for the special tape paint that was so expensive when we put it out for bid the first time. Is that something that would be considered a CIP project? And if so, have we done that rebidding that we voted to pursue?
Yeah, we have rebid that a second time, and it was very costly, and I think even more than the first time we bid it. So then when we discussed that again, we had talked about doing that as a service type project. So if you recall, I believe that was really kind of a house latex type paint. Isn't that right, Damien?
Yeah, we got colored paint, or in the colors that we needed, and just rolled it on using hand rollers. And it's a latex style paint, not even a road paint, and it held up surprisingly well.
Very well. So that was the approach that we had discussed, was doing that as a community service project, and we could have one or more of our staff kind of act as supervisors and assistants for whatever community group wanted to take that on. But we're really surprised and really happy with how well it's held up.
Well, I know that when we first got the council action form, the estimate was that paint was going to last a year, and that that it would have to be redone. And, you know, it's been more than a year. We didn't have Pride Fest this last year, and I don't know whether we'll be having one this year. Let's hope the vaccines are working and that's possible. But we had also discussed initially that it may be possible to expand this kind of project to Campus Town and involve student government in a project. And that was put on hold because of the work that we were doing in Campus Town with all those public works projects. So I'm wondering if, given the state of the public works projects in Campus Town at this point, is that a discussion that we should be reopening if we're interested in pursuing that? Or are we still doing enough work around Campus Town that now is not the time to pursue additional crosswalk painting?
Well, I think you could have that discussion at any time. We do have in the CIP, the next section, the 200 block of Welch, that we'll be making improvements on. I believe that's in the third year, so 23, 24. But I don't think that would prevent you from having that discussion whenever you feel appropriate.
Would you recommend going back and also painting in Campus Town because the cost is becoming so exorbitant on the permanent applied materials in John?
Well, I know the project includes the traditional pavement markings for the section that we just did. So I think we'll continue to have those installed in the spring, just so that we're in compliance. And then at whatever point that council wants to have that discussion, and then if you make that direction to include that intersection or any others, then we can work with whatever council decides and directs.
I guess I did a good job posing the question. I guess the question is, it sounds like the price actually went up and it's becoming extremely expensive to try and apply these vinyl materials to have these colors. I think something in my mind is $50,000 or $60,000 or more is what it seemed like it was for the cross. Maybe it's more than that. So I think what we're hearing you say is probably better to just consider painting it versus trying to go with this vinyl material. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry I misunderstood. We've taken 2 runs at that more permanent type approach, and it's just surprisingly exorbitant. So I think that that latex approach that we did at 5th and Douglas, that seemed to last pretty well. So I think that's probably the more pragmatic approach at any intersections that you want to do something similar.
Even the vinyl wasn't like a 15, 20 year solution. I mean, it had a finite lifespan too. Is that correct?
Right. I think that was maybe 5 or 6 years. Is that the average life of that, Damien? Like the thermoplastic?
You hope so, but not to put Justin on the spot, but if you have a heavy snow, it's almost not worth the investment because you could peel off if you can't grind and inset that type of pavement marking. There's just so much risk associated with that high of a cost that sticking with the more household style paints, and you could even do it like twice a year if you had a volunteer group to do it, once in the spring and then once in the fall before winter, and it'll hold up, especially for the cost, much better than trying to take the risk with thermoplastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the last program we have in transportation is airport. And for the airport improvements, the focus will be mainly on lighting improvements. So our first and fourth year will be lighting improvements. And then the second year will be apron improvements just outside of the terminal. If there's no questions on airport, then that concludes our transportation section and all the public works programs in this version of the CIP.
And try the video again, John?
Yeah, we'll give that another run here, see if we can get that to play. Looks like it's going. So I want to thank Channel 12 Media Production Services for putting that together for us. Pretty cool video. So thanks to them for that, and thanks to all our field crews and engineers that carry these projects out and make sure they're done correctly for the community.
One more question, sorry. So South Fifth, I've already been raving about this to council, but it's an amazing, amazing addition. Will the bike path on the south side of that continue on to Grand Avenue?
Yeah, and then Grand Avenue path will both follow the roadway as well as then connect on the other side of the creek with the Vet Med Trail. And eventually you saw the Squaw Creek Trail and the shared use path expansion. Eventually all that will connect together.
Wow, outstanding.
Really, really great improvement. Lots of people using that South Fifth extension already.
Good, yep.
John, that question reminds me of another one that I had related to bicycle facilities. That Campus Town Improvements page in the CIP mentions extending the bicycle facilities on Welch Avenue, and it says from Union Drive to Mortensen Road. And I know Welch Avenue stops at Storm, and then we get Institutional Road on Welch Road. So where is the bicycle facility that connects from Storm to Mortensen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if we've worked the details of that out yet with Iowa State. Tracy, do we have a plan, an agreement with Iowa State for how that'll look yet?
I do not believe we have that detail worked out yet, but we continue to have quarterly meetings with Iowa State so we can start those conversations.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, gonna move on to transit. Barb?
All right, hang on just one sec.
Council pages 118 to 122.
All right, see the screen, I assume?
Yes, thank you.
You see the screen without any notes or anything? Looks like I might have shared the wrong screen, so.
We just see the presentation.
Perfect, then. Okay, so good evening, Mayor and Council, thank you. Before I get started, I do want to take just a moment and introduce the two people I have in the room with me. These are my division managers. So over here is Chris Crippen, Assistant Director of Operations, and then James Rendell, who's the Interim Assistant Director of Fleet and Facilities. So I should also mention that the CIP was approved by our transit board in the December board meeting. So This section of the CIP starts on page 117, as the mayor mentioned. This portion of the CIP has approximately $22 million programmed for capital projects over the next 5 years. As Steve mentioned in the beginning of the CIP, this year has been like no other, and there will likely be economic uncertainty over the next year and beyond. So kind of in this environment, we've taken a conservative approach in developing the CIP to ensure that there's adequate funding. We have put a few capital priority projects on hold as we kind of adjust and refocus to our new ridership levels and patterns as we kind of enter this post-pandemic world. Additionally, the transit portion of the CIP is very dependent on the availability of both federal, state, and local funding. So the projects outlined in the CIP do support our goal of connecting people to the community with safe and efficient transportation that exceeds customers' expectations. It also aligns with one of SIRIDE's core priorities, which is to keep our capital equipment in a state of good repair, which is imperative to safety, and it's also an FTA requirement that we preserve transit investments. I think you'll find also the CIP supports the community and council's goals of reducing carbon emissions and providing a sustainable community in which to live. So the CIP is prioritized with the greatest emphasis on vehicle replacement and facility improvements. Like I mentioned, maintaining our fleet is essential to our continued success. Investing in new vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles supports the goal of sustainability. The other emphasis in the CIP is facility and building improvements. So investing in equipment and adapting our facilities kind of supports that overall or environmental goal of quality of life to provide better air quality within our facility. So those two areas account for approximately $21 million of our programmed capital. So the first section is vehicle replacement and rehabilitation, and that starts on page 118. So as I mentioned earlier, maintaining our vehicles in that state of good repair is imperative for safety as well as meeting a federal requirement. So over the next 5 years, we have programmed the replacement of 25 large buses and 3 minibuses. One of the projects that we planned in FY23 that we're very excited about is the purchase of 3 additional battery electric buses. So because of the CARES funding, we were able to take a one-time transfer of our federal dollars to support this purchase. So these zero emission buses will replace 3 40-foot diesel vehicles. They'll reduce overall carbon emissions by 5,760 pounds per year, which is about 70% lower than the buses that they'll be replacing. So SIRIDE is already procuring our 2 battery electric buses that will come to council next time. So with this purchase, that would move our all-electric fleet to 5 vehicles, moving us towards that more sustainable future. Additionally, we'll upgrade 3 40-foot buses to 3 60-foot articulated buses. So after that procurement, we would have 10 vehicles, 10 articulated buses, and so the entire number 23 orange route could be articulated buses. We're anticipating the cost of these vehicles over the next 5 years will be approximately $16.8 million, with 80% or more of the funding coming from either state or federal grants. So the 22 vehicle replacements FY22 section accounts for $2.7 million. SIRIDE has always been very successful at securing both federal and state grants, which has allowed us to keep our system in that state of good repair. It also lowers the funding partner's financial commitment. So in FY22, we are upgrading 1 40-foot bus to a 60-foot bus. By upgrading that bus, the capacity on that vehicle will be greater, but the cost of service will be the same, and it has the same engine emissions as a 40-foot vehicle. We're expecting that bus to be delivered probably spring of 23. SIRIDE also received funding for 3 40-foot buses, which will replace 3 older 40-foot diesel buses. These new vehicles have they're less expensive to operate. They have cleaner emissions, 90% less nitrous oxide and particulate matter than the buses they're replacing. And delivery for those, we're anticipating again, spring of 23 as well. We will also be submitting a Volkswagen settlement grant. So if successful, the local funding share for these vehicles will be reduced even further. In 22, we've also programmed midlife rehabilitation. So Cyride was extremely fortunate to be able to purchase 15 new buses 10 years ago with stimulus money. These buses, though, are now at the point where it is necessary to perform midlife refurbishing to address corrosion issues. We also received grant funding to purchase 2 new low-floor minibuses. These will replace high-floor minibuses. So the new low-floor minibus style will improve accessibility for passengers who need the wheelchair lift. And it'll also help any individuals who have difficulty navigating the stairs. So really supporting that goal of connecting people by increasing mobility through greater accessibility. We will be replacing 1 support vehicle in 22. Currently, as you can see here, we're scheduled to replace it with a hybrid, which is what these vehicles are, but we are evaluating moving forward with an all-electric support vehicle to see if that's an option for us. And then the next section for Cyride is building improvements and expansion on page 119. And that accounts for a little bit over $4 million of program capital over the next 5 years. We're fortunate again to receive a grant to complete a much needed facility improvement to our HVAC system. The HVAC equipment in this area is between 15 and 37 years old, and it'll improve the overall air quality in that part of the facility. We also have the HVAC project programmed into 3 phases. So this is phase 2, and we'll have phase 3 programmed in FY23. We have programmed a spill-free fueling system. This will replace our current fuel dispensing system. Our current system, believe it or not, was installed in 2003 with used equipment at the time that it was installed. So this new system will allow for quicker, more efficient fueling with a significant reduction in fuel spillage because of the new design of how that couples with the fuel intake. And then followed by that, we have a water main replacement project in 24. We will be pursuing grant funding opportunities for all 3 of these projects. Let's see, we have allocated funding for fall protection rails. As you can see, this is fixing a hybrid bus here, but these buses will provide additional protection for personnel maintaining the articulated buses. We did put the facility expansion or relocation on hold for another year as we kind of adjust to declining ridership and really focusing on right sizing our fleet and facility to determine really the best path forward for us. We do have it programmed in 25 and in 26. We've put $750,000 into the CIP to either expand where we're at or look to a new facility if there are grant opportunities available and if the operations warranted. Currently, we have about $715,000 in local match for any kind of facility improvements or expansion. Okay, let's see. Next, we have technology improvements, and that's on page 120. So advancements in transit technology have really grown significantly over the past several years, and Cyride will continue to support innovative technology that preserves access to our current riders, helps us attract more riders, and helps improve overall system efficiency. The role of technology is going to be especially critical this next budget year. With expected decreases in riderships and revenue, we plan to increase the amount of data collected from the system, kind of leveraging existing and emerging technologies to identify efficiencies in areas where we can improve. So we will be expanding the number of vehicles with automatic passenger counter hardware to support this initiative. So this will provide passengers with real-time information like shown here about the number of people aboard a bus. So adding that capability will allow people to see how full the bus is live. It will also allow us to respond faster to ridership patterns. And Cyride did submit, and I know you guys approved this in the MPO, but we did submit a federal grant application in 2020 to deploy this technology across the entire fleet. We were notified this afternoon that the project was awarded. So at 95% of what we had requested, which is fantastic news. Because of this funding, we'll be able to install that APC counters across most of our fleet. It wasn't fully funded, but 95%. So this will happen much sooner than we were anticipating, and it will reduce the cost of the local funding partners. We will also continue to invest in bus display monitors on the vehicles that will visually display the next stops along the route, and that will help passengers with disabilities. SIRIDE had a regulatory requirement to develop and certify an agency safety plan. So SIRIDE is going to invest in safety software to help manage this compliance. The software will improve operational performance, it will simplify reporting, and it will provide analytical data to kind of help us mitigate risk as well as support safety and continuous improvements. And then under facility technology, or under technology, we also have facility technology. So upgrades to facility technology kind of encompasses two areas. Technology originally installed in the SIRIDE facility is now over 10 years old, has become obsolete. So we'll be replacing some of that. And we will be investing in upgrading our facility Wi-Fi system with additional receivers so that we can pull security camera information through the Wi-Fi. Let's see, bus stop improvement plan, that is on page 121. So SIRIDE 2.0 and the pandemic have created a significant shift in ridership patterns, leading to a reduction in the amount that we budgeted in FY22 and 23. So we have budgeted $25,000 this year in the CIP for smaller projects to allow us to make minor upgrades to stops in response to community feedback. We will be updating the bus stop improvement plan in a more stable ridership kind of environment to determine patterns and make sure wherever we're making upgrades, we're enhancing it for the most customers, the greatest number of riders. So you can see we've increased the funding in subsequent years to reflect that. And then finally, the next part of the transit is shop and office equipment, and that's on page 122. So we've programmed the replacement of office and computer equipment between $14,400 and $20,400 per fiscal year. SIRIDE Maintenance owns several pieces of specialized equipment, so we budget $50,000 a year for shop equipment. That specialized equipment is really used to maintain the buses so that we can stay in compliance with that FTA requirement. Estimating that's going to cost about $15,000 to replace that equipment. But historically, SIRIDE has spent about $45,000 to $50,000 each fiscal year on shop equipment. I probably went fast because we're towards the end and everybody's probably tired, but this does conclude the transit portion of the CIP. Any of us would be happy to answer any questions you might have, but thank you very much for your time.
Questions for Barb or her team? Barb, I'm curious, what's the price difference between a 40-foot diesel bus and a 40-foot BEV?
Well, let's see. Well, I'll let James answer, but I think I know. But
it's around $300,000 each.
So it's still a significant price difference.
It is.
Like $600,000 to $900,000. Is that correct? Ballpark or?
Yeah, I think we're bringing to council 840. I can't remember.
846, I believe.
Yeah, about 850,000 for the battery electric bus.
Well,
good news about the APCs though. That's really good news.
That is very exciting. Thanks for being the bearer of happy news today. So that's very exciting. So. Well, thank you for the presentation. You did a thorough job. There's no questions, and have a good evening.
You guys too.
Thank you for coming. All right. The remainder of the presentation is Mr. Shanker, apparently.
I can help move us along. You've seen most of these projects. On page 9, we have fire apparatus replacement you've seen before. This year, we're going to replace our frontline ladder truck, refurbish the old one, and have it as a backup, which will be excellent. Provide backup service to our citizens. This one involves the replacement of one of our 2 frontline pumper engine trucks, which we've done in the second year of the capital improvements plan. You've seen that one before. Any questions on that? Okay, I can help you along. Then we can move to page 140. A library carpet replacement. We're planning for replacing the carpet. I can tell you this is a major undertaking. If you think all the furniture and stacks you have to move, and we're going to actually have to start planning for that at City Hall too, which will be an immense undertaking. But right now we have that planned in for the library in the second and third year of the CIP. Any questions? Then if you look at page 144, we're continuing our downtown facade program with funding from local option sales tax for that program. Our campus town facade program, we have funding from local option sales tax also in that business district, continuing that up. Page 146, we have the popular neighborhood improvement program and funding from local option sales tax for that particular project. And then
Steve, can I ask you something about that neighborhood grant program?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible for neighborhoods to apply for money for art projects that they might want to do?
In their neighborhood?
Yeah.
I think it's flexible enough the way we wrote it that the neighbor could get together and say what's important to them. But remember, we're looking for some type of interaction with them, maybe some sweat equity, not just dollar amount. So if it's just donating money, we're trying to have some planning and interaction to create a sense of neighborhood. So we'll have to prove how that would work. But you can actually come together and say, we want to paint a deteriorating garage on someone's private property. If that's a priority of that neighborhood, it's possible. So I just don't know how we could work on the actual interaction of the neighbors on the project, but I'll think about it.
Well, I think we do have.
Brian's here through the public art program. You can use public art has been dispensed to different neighborhoods, right, Brian? Are you there?
Sorry, yes, we have a neighborhood art program that takes the several of the sculptures from the Ames Annual Outdoor Sculpture Exhibition and places it into neighborhoods or in developed areas based on an application process. And so 3 or 4 pieces per year are typically chosen for that program.
So it might be more appropriate for that program, Gloria, but.
Oh, I was thinking of things like if they wanted to paint a mural on somebody's garage or a wall in the area. Or I think we also have a code section that allows street painting.
Right.
And that has been very little used, but now that we're talking more about arts, this might be another program where we want to point out to people that that money could be used in that way, as long as there is that sweat equity component involved.
So if you're talking about the group putting together the project themselves, yes, that would qualify. And it could be even on private property, like you said, a mural on private property. If they gather together and say that's a priority. Good idea. And then we have our funding on page 147 for continuous support of City Hall improvements. Again, we'll be showing you a large need for the carpeting project, which will be immense, reflooring in the City Hall in the future. So you've seen most of those. I think that's it, is it not, Mayor?
Correct.
One final thing I'd like to go over with you again, as a reminder, but also for the public, is the concept on Roman numeral page 7, I believe. It's the mandated debt limit that we have, and I want Dwayne to go over that page with you if we could. It would be good for the public to understand it. So I think it's Roman numeral 7. You remember this debt capacity for the city council and the public. Dwayne, why don't you go over that with council one more time, please? Dwayne, wake up. You have to unmute. I know he's on.
There we go.
There you go.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you make Dwayne, can you close your bookmarks tab and make that a little bigger? Yeah.
I can. Why don't I just make it bigger here so you can
Okay.
jump around?
That'd be great.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. So this is projection of debt capacity by state code. We're limited to the amount of debt that we can have outstanding, and it's a percent of our total actual value. And we also reserve on top of that 25%. So we hold back a little bit amount of the capacity. So if you just want to look at the first year of the budget, 21, 22, we have actual valuation of a little over $5 billion. The state limit is 5% of that, so we could have 259 million of debt. We reserve an extra 64, so that allows you, if you want to have a referendum vote or something else, you'll always have the capacity for that. Then we have unreserved capacity of 194. We've got some proposed issues where we have the outstanding debt, current issues, and proposed issues. This is the one that gets tweaked a little bit, but it only changes percentages by hundreds. And then we have the new issue, and that gives the total debt subject to the limit and the unreserved amount. And then you see our total unreserved capacity, total debt capacity. Those are those percentages. And we plan this out over 5 years. We assume some growth. I also assumed a little bit increase in the interest rate. I don't think they can stay this low forever, but I've been wrong before. But you see that's pretty even across there as far as the debt capacity for each of the 5 years of the CIP. So maintaining a good, strong debt capacity, kept your 25% limit, and you've got plenty available if something would come up.
Now, when we talk about debt capacity, we're talking about general obligation debt, you understand? It's not revenue bond debt. So we're talking about the debt capacity here. The limit of 5% of your evaluation is based on general obligation issue debt, which could be voter approved debt or debt that we use for streets. Remember that we use geo bonds for streets and some other projects, central corporate purpose as defined by the state. Okay, I just want to make sure you understand that is one of the limitations local government has on municipal government.
And does these philosophies and the way that you're operating also gives us a very high bond rating or bond capacity or bond bond rating, so to speak?
Historically, the council has a number of very prudent and fiscally conservative policies. So in essence, our debt capacity is above and beyond what the state mandates. There are some cities who are at I can tell you, have issued their maximum debt limit.
Wow.
Unfortunately, there's some that actually went over a year or two, made a mistake. But we reserve 25% of the maximum amount we have. So we're more conservative in that regard. And that's one of the elements they look at in doing your bond rating. And that's why we attract very good interest rates when we issue bonds. Any questions on that? Just a refresher, and hopefully it's education for the public who's watching. I want to emphasize one other thing on the back of my transmittal letter. I know council always wants to know what are some of the projects that we're thinking about but haven't been included in the CIP. And the reason I don't put those in there because unless the council, we have more information, the council is committed to those. I don't like to put those in there because if I put those in there because I want to provide a level debt service, if you will, I will probably have to cut out some other projects. And I hate to lose some good projects if we're not sure we're going to do these projects. So there's a lot more work we have to do on these, as you'll see. And these are in no particular order, but we're working obviously with a new indoor aquatic center. We have a fresh new idea of approaching that. You'll be talking about it in the next couple of weeks through the state's Reinvestment Act to see if we can obtain funding to help us pay for that indoor facility. There are 2 fire stations we're going to have to be talking about in the future. We talked about relocating Fire Station 2. We're in discussions with Iowa State University about relocating Station 2 to property along State Avenue. And then when the long range or comprehensive plan is completed, we'll know then to lay out how we're going to lay out our long-term response plan for fire stations. And it may require a fourth station, and we don't know when that will be or what part of the city is going to be until we finalize that plan. And another one that's near to dear in us, as you know, our animal control facility is totally antiquated. It's outlived its useful life. So we're exploring the cost of either upgrading that facility or building a new one. Preliminary indications are it's going to be more cost effective to build a new one. We're also checking to see how other cities have financed this. A lot of cities have financed these type of facilities through private donations substantially. This could be a $4 to $5 million project in and of itself. So we have a lot more work to do on, I think, all four of these before I'm prepared to layer them into the capital improvements plan. But we're looking at them. Any questions on those projects or my thought process here? Those should not be new to you either. Okay, finally, we know we've given you a lot and the public a lot. This document's online now. We want the public to look at it. We're gonna reserve some time at the next council meeting to get some feedback on it, but I don't want people to panic and think that's the only time you can give feedback. You're actually not gonna make a decision on this until your wrap-up decisions on February 9th. So we make your final decisions regarding the capital improvements plan and the operating budget on February 9th. So if people can't or have time and participate in giving input next week, you can certainly pass information along to the city staff or the city council by way of email on some of your suggestions, either in support of projects or maybe you're against the project, or perhaps we've left the project out. I do want to emphasize that I try to approach this very seriously, this capital improvements plan. Many cities just throw all these projects in here. People get excited about it, and then you find you can't pay for the projects. So we balance this budget. This is actually not a budget, but we balance these projects. We've projected out, let's say, like road use tax for the next 5 years. So I'm pretty well assured if I've put this project into this plan and I've showed road use tax funding, we're pretty sure we'll have those funds available for you. So there's some financial reality to this document, which is very important. You could tell me to do 1,000 things out of local option tax, and we might not have that money, given our current trend in local option tax. So there is some financial realism to this document. So we'll have to balance budgets. Some of the projects you may want to add, since it's balanced right now, we may have to remove or slide if we want to accelerate projects. All right, does that all make sense to everybody? So there's plenty of time for the council to ask questions, the public to ask questions, and give input before final decisions are made on February 9th. So I want to thank you for your patience. I know it takes a long time to go over these. Departments have worked really hard on these. Again, the uncertainty of COVID has really put a lot of pressure on this. We know that each one of these projects results in either property tax increases or utility fee increases. So we're trying to really hold the line on these projects to the ones that are most important right now to the citizens of Ames. Any questions you might have? Follow-up information? All right, I think we're done for tonight from our standpoint, Mayor.
Well, I said it before in previous years, but extremely well done, very well organized. Staff's always prepared to understand the projects. They can answer the questions, and you lead a great team, Steve. You did a phenomenal job, and while there's a lot of pages, I find it easy to read when you get used to how it's all organized and follow through and the rationale. So thank you very much. It was very well done.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on. We do not have any dispositions of communications to council to consider this evening. So we'll move on to council comments, and Rachel, we'll start out with you tonight.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Thank you. How about you, Nicole?
Nothing tonight.
But you aren't going to announce what's going to happen next Monday?
Not yet.
I think students are coming back next Monday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, sort of online, sort of in person.
Okay. All right. David?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Tim?
Super exciting to see these projects. Many communities don't have an opportunity to do a fraction of the kinds of things that we're doing. So very happy to be in Ames tonight.
Thanks, Tim. Gloria?
Last night's MLK celebration went very well as a virtual celebration. It was really inspiring, and I want to thank everyone who worked on the organizing and participated in it, and those people who sponsored it. The other thing is for council, and that is that the International Town and Gown Association is having another virtual conference this year in May, and the early bird rate for that ends this Friday. And if we have a certain volume of people who are interested in going, we get further discounts. So if any of you are interested in participating in that, I think it's May 24th through the 26th. I can send you information on that, and maybe we can continue our involvement with that worthwhile conference. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Bronwyn.
Nothing for me tonight other than to thank staff for that presentation.
Thank you. Amber?
No, nothing for me. Thanks.
I'll just echo what Gloria said. I just thought that last night, the MLK Planning Committee and our Bill and also our auditorium manager did an outstanding job. It was, I would call it basically a flawless, smooth presentation. And it was just very moving to see so many community leaders, many here on the screen tonight, holding up quotes from MLK, but people from McFarland Clinic, Mary Greeley, Iowa State, city, chamber, business community, nonprofits, and then the essay that was written, just outstanding. So good job, and it was just something that was inspiring. And then Wayne Clinton's personal story was very powerful as well. So a very proud moment to be involved with that as part of the Ames community. Remind people too is that Thursday night there is a presentation online, a virtual presentation on the downtown Plaza. People can join that at 7 o'clock, and looking for feedback and input. Council, you're already aware of it, and we'll be seeing that next Tuesday night also, coming back to council with some for some feedback as well. So anyway, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
All right, Gloria, thank you. Everyone have a good rest of the evening, and we will see you no later next Tuesday night.